Now for the Now You Try problem, we're looking at the scenario where if you're playing a guitar and you have the different options with just one single string. So if you're plucking the E string while not pressing any fret, you would get just the E note, but as you are pluck the E string while holding down the different frets, you're going to get different notes throughout the process. So this one can be a little bit tricky, but I'd like you to take some time to read the scenario and try to work out what are the different inputs and outputs for the situation. And also pay attention that this continues on for 19 different frets. So we're talking about just a standard guitar usually has 19 frets for each string that you can play with. So take some time to read the question and try to work out this whole process. Try to complete as many questions as you can before continue on with the video over here. Once you're done attempting this problem on your own, we can continue on from part A. And in part A, we're asking what are the inputs for the E string of the guitar over here. So for the E string, we said you can just plug the string without pressing on any fret. On the other hand, if you pluck the string while pressing on the frets, you have 19 frets that you could technically be pressing on over here. So the inputs are a little bit easier in this scenario to kind of figure out. We would just have the E string as is without frets, and E string with first fret, second fret, etc., all the way to the 19th frets over here. So I'm just going to write down the list over here. So it could just be E string, and it could be E string with the first fret. I'm not going to write down all of them over here, but I'm going to list out a few so you get the idea. And we can have E string plus the second fret plus the third fret all the way to E string while pressing on the 19th fret. So altogether, you should count to get 20 different inputs in this scenario. And now regarding the outputs for the E string of this guitar, while you're plucking the E string, you can see by default without pressing any fret, you can get the note for E. And then if you pluck the E string while holding down the first fret, you get the note F over here. And this might be something that's related to the music knowledge, and it might be a little bit easier to see while looking at the keyboard as well. We'll talk about this in a minute. And the next option, if you pluck E string while holding down the second fret, you'll get F sharp over here. And then if you pluck the E string while holding down the third fret, you get G over here. And then we would get G sharp as the next one. And as you might consider the different type of notes we have, you might be thinking about sharp versus flat, and there are some equivalency between some sharp notes versus some flat notes. I'm not going to go into too much details because I'm not personally an expert in music myself, so I don't want to go into too much details about this, but just know that in this situation we're just considering the regular note or the sharp notes in this case. And as we move on, we can have the G sharp. Then after the G notes, some of you might be more familiar with this than others. The notes go through letters C, D, E, F, G, then A, B over here, just to denote the 7 different notes we have in music. So after G, we would actually go back to A over here, and then we can have A sharp over here. And then after A sharp, we get B. And after B, actually, we don't have a B sharp, and as we said, we can actually look at a keyboard and that'll make a little bit more sense. So we don't have a B sharp, that's why we would just jump from B to C, and that's exactly the same idea as to why we could jump from E to F over here, because we don't have an E sharp over here. And then from B, we don't have a B sharp, that's why we skip directly to C over here. And then after C, we can have C sharp. And lastly, from C, we jump to D, and we get D sharp as well at the end over here. And if you are less familiar with the music notes and how the keyboards work or the music string works, I'm putting in also a notes or a keyboard picture over here with the notes labeled over here. So we're talking about in guitar, it works very similarly as what we're doing here. If we start from E, you can see there's no black key, therefore there's no sharp for E between E and F. So for after E, we directly jump to F over here. And then that gets to the point where we say that the F sharp is really equivalent to G flat over here in the black key that we are looking at, for example. And another thing, as we keep going, we see that there's F sharp, G sharp, then we also have A sharp, then go to B over here. You can look at either B over here or B over here. They would function the same way. There's no black key, meaning there's no sharp for B in terms of the notes that we're considering. So that's why from B we would directly go to C as a next note. And then we would have C sharp, D, and eventually D sharp as a result. And these are all the possible outputs we have over here. Now that we looked at all the possible outputs, you might have noticed that if we count all the number of outputs, it's not as many as the number of inputs we have. We noted that there are a total of 20 different elements in the inputs over here. So we can have 20 different inputs over here. Now regarding the outputs, if we look at it, we would have a total of 12 different outputs over here. And I think I accidentally pressed a button over here. And in this case, we would have different number of inputs and outputs. That just means that if we have every 12 notes going on, we would have repeated notes throughout this process over here. And generally with the 20 different inputs, we're going to repeat after the D sharp over here for another 8 notes. That's what we should notice over here. So after D sharp, we would go back to E again, which is the beginning of the list of the outputs we have. And if we keep going with the different frets, we should repeat for the first 8 of the outputs again over here. So we do have repeated outputs over here. And there should be a total of 8 of them. They are going to be the first 8 in the list. So we have E, F. Again, it might help to kind of read through the keyboard. We can start from E over here and go to F next. Then the black key is the next one, which is F sharp. And then G, then G sharp, then A sharp. I think we need one more, which gets us to B over here. And these are the repeated outputs we have over here, but we don't have any repeated inputs over here. And now if we are a little bit more familiar with how this process works, we can move on to part D. In part D, we know we're asking what note will you get if you plug the E string while holding the 5th fret over here. So one thing you could do is just count through the keyboard. So we know that if you don't hold down any fret, we are at E, and then the next one, that means that's the 1st fret, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, 4th fret, and 5th fret over here while we're plugging E string. And that means the note we would get is A over here if we just number it. Similarly, if we want to find out what note we will get if we plug the E string while holding the 12th fret, we can keep counting technically over here. So we get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 over here. We can see that we would go back to the note E over here. Hopefully it's not too surprising, because if we look at the total number of outputs we can have, it's a total of 12 different outputs. So that means every 12 addition, or if you count every 12 fret that we are going through in the process, we're going to go back to the beginning over here. So in this case, we would say we would go back to the E note over here all over again. And you can kind of count the keyboard in a similar manner as how we count the notes we get by using the string and fret combination over here. And if that makes sense to you, then we can move on to this, but otherwise take some time to look at the keyboard to make sure this process of knowing the input to figure out the output still makes sense to you. Now for parts F and G, we're looking at the situation where we want to find out what fret do you have to hold in order to get a G note, and also what fret do you have to hold in order to get a C note over here. And in this process, we're given the output and we want to figure out what's the input that's corresponding to that. So to get the G note, we already did some of the numbering, so that should help you answer the question as well. To get the G note, we can be holding down to the 3rd fret over here. But we also said the notes are going to repeat themselves for every 12th fret over here. So in addition to the 3rd fret, if we go another 12 frets over here, we would actually get 3 plus 12, which is a 15th fret, which still works. And if you want to check your answer, we can keep the numbering going on the keyboard. To get F key or F note, we can also hold down to the 13th fret while plucking the E string. 14 here, 15 is what we will get if we want to use a G note in this case. Now similarly, if we want to find what fret you will have to hold in order to get a C note, we already see through our numbering the 8th note is going to be, or the 8th fret is going to be what we have to hold down to. And now if you think about the pattern we found, every 12th fret we will get the same note. You might want to consider if we add 12 to this 8th fret, we will get 20th fret. In this case, we only have 19 frets in the scenario, so we can't have a second option in order to get a C note. And that should check with our conclusion in part C. We see that C note is not something that can be repeated as the output, so there's only one way to get the C note, through the E string in this process.